show you.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the December 12th edition of the Idaho Washington Aquifer Collaborative. By Jay, have been asked to pitch in for Suzanne, and she wasn't able to make it today. So we're recording the meeting because she can kind of tune in and see what we discussed. I don't think everybody knows everyone, so maybe we can skip some introductions unless you guys really want to reintroduce ourselves with each other. But we'll skip the introductions. Was there any additions to the agenda, revisions to the agenda was published? You know of, Tony?
No, I don't know of any.
All right. So next item on the agenda is the approval of the November 14th meeting minutes. And those have been distributed and there are copies on the table here. Does anybody have any comments, additions, changes?
I read through it and it looked good.
Our email addresses need to be updated on there. I don't know, if you just catch it for the next time.
Oh, yours?
Yeah,
Did I not get those?
yeah, just catch it for the next time.
Okay,
It's posted
That's
all
right.
.gov, not no Idaho.org anymore. But I didn't see anything else.
will do.
All right, so one amendment to the meeting minutes is noted. Anybody object to approving those? Hearing none, all right. No run, presume no financial report or?
The only thing that I wanted to add was that we did receive the reimbursement from the from DEQ Source Water Protection Grant. And if you picked up one of the, or you saw in your email, I sent a 2023 IWAC budget updated with 12/12. And so the $22,800 has been added back in. I don't have an updated Mountain West bank balance because that's something Ron would do. But so I'm guessing that's that would eventually reflect the 22,800. So that reimbursement is not reflected in the 1031 Mountain West bank balance. I think that's all, and just the $2,000 for Drippy the water drop that has been paid. So I think everything else was there previously, so there's nothing else to add.
All right, thank you, Tony Lee, for that update. Any questions on any of those matters that Tony Lee talked about in the financial aspects? Okay, we'll move on to first item under our old business is the funding and updating the 2007 USGS Aquifer Study. And Susanna prepared some slides and some talking points, so we'll get those up and get shared. And I believe that Dan has been graciously volunteer or voluntold to
Take your pick.
help lead that PowerPoint presentation and this discussion.
One second, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger if I can.
That makes two of you.
Yeah.
All told.
Right. Can everyone online hear me okay?
That's the thumbs.
I got a thumbs up, Doug, so we'll run with that. So this is kind of a follow-up discussion. Last month's meeting, when we talked a little bit about what BiState Aquifer update would look like in real general terms. And I think what we want to do now, what Suzanne asked me to kind of share with you and see if we can't get the group moving towards consensus, but probably just a little bit more than that. So we'll go on to the next slide, if you would, Tony. So as we mentioned at our last meeting, this really does align a lot with what IWAC, its mission is. So this, the update of this model is not important for, each of us individually, but as we look across the border, everybody kind of dancing to the same sheet of music makes a lot of sense. And hopefully one of those things that was discussed during the camp meetings back in, gosh, when was that? Early 2000s?
2010.
2010 maybe, really to, hold off any of those disagreements across those borders. So this really aligns with what camp had envisioned for this group to do. And there are some definite benefits with updating the model. There's a lot of data still that has not been updated for the past 18 plus years. I often said, would you use your, iPhone 6 or iPhone 4 today, or would you have the same phone you had 15, 16 years ago? Probably not. So with the changes in what we see today, not just, in growth projections, demand scenarios, climate, but the technology has improved so much that it just makes sense to do this now. There's also a great opportunity to look at the boundaries of the aquifer and perhaps how we may delineate those. And this, I know, is going to be some of the stickier points when we start to look at that. So I would ask that everybody, try to identify some of those partners that would help us look at that so that we can, begin to build a little bit consensus, and we'll get into that in just a little bit more here in a minute. So,
Might just touch on that point, like, and Alyssa can contest, there's been a bit of discussion in Cooney County APD with regard to those boundaries and which boundary to use and which is most appropriate for which boundary for what purpose. So I think that would be particularly helpful outcome.
yeah,
There's been less issues that I've heard of on the Washington side.
right.
I think just because the nature of that being developed out to the extent of the aquifer, and in Idaho, there's more newer development approaching the fringe areas.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think you're right, BJ. At our last meeting, I forget the gentleman's name now, Seth?
Seth Oliver.
Was here and discussed some of those very things that you just brought up, that there might be, I don't want to say political, but perhaps different points of view on how and where those boundaries should be delineated. So
even if you were able to capture it, in this next study, it's going to be outdated within a few years, right? With all the development and changing happening on the Idaho side.
well, I think when you look at the model itself, that's what we're really looking to upgrade. There's always going to be, those additions or corrections within the model, such as demand forecasts and potentially even climate, if climate shifts one way or another, that would plug into the model, but not be the base of the model. Does that make sense? Okay. A little bit more on recap of that 14th meeting on the last month on the 14th. She mentions here in their slide that it's getting the most cohesive data that we can, integrating that. But we also talked about, what are the possibilities of USGS updating this model, and it was quickly kind of thwarted at that meeting because of the cost and perhaps timeline that existed, that we may not be looking at a model update for several years, and it may be cost prohibitive. So the group kind of decided at that point to look, how could we do this ourselves with looking at a private hydrogeologic firm to do the work, and that was selected as the best option. But this is where things get interesting. If you go to the next slide, please. Our current topic that I really kind of want to talk today, and maybe we can just spend a couple of minutes brainstorming about this, is you know, we want to really develop what that focus area looks like. That helps to drive a purpose statement, which would then drive the scope of work. So as you mentioned, defining those boundaries of the SBRP, evaluating what it looks like with a multi-layer model. Currently, the USGS is just one solid, one layer. The new mod flow models can be bisected by depth, which may change flow characteristics. I can't speak to that specifically. I'm not a hydrogeologist. But one of the things that Suzanne and I talked a little bit about too was, you know, we do have some understanding of what feeds the aquifer.
Well, and the thing services in the contract are to put in charging stations for trucks.
That's upriver.
No clue.
Oh, that's somebody in the background.
Yeah.
I thought it was a question.
Doug's office.
But anyway, reevaluating what the aquifer looks like from a recharge standpoint with the lakes, it's Pend Oreille, Hayden, and Hauser, of course, Coeur d'Alene. We know a lot about the Spokane River and the interactions there, not to make light of that. But what do we understand? Maybe there's a better understanding on the Idaho side, which perhaps is on the Washington side. But I think, you know, a better view of that recharge might help define what those boundaries look like too. So especially when we start to talk about protection areas. Then of course, land use shifts in land use. Ron brought this up at our last meeting, how much it had shifted from agricultural to residential, what those impacts are. And then we really haven't had anything that's been updated in the model as far as use and what those pumping rates are. And then there's probably some other areas of focus that we should consider. And before we start to brainstorm, I think I do want to jump to this next slide because it does have some content in that that I'm sure that people would want to think about. But understanding that the model can't do it all, are there items on, you know, either some of those areas of focus or in some of the items that are listed on the screen right now that we really should be considering as we, you know, look towards building this purpose statement? And I know it may not necessarily be fair to get this tossed on you right now and come up with all these brilliant ideas. But if there's something that you thought about that makes sense, throw it out there. If not, if you could either send it to me, Suzanne, or Tony Lee, by Jay, what that might be, that would be greatly appreciated. There's a comment, what does the model not do? Well, it doesn't solve global warming or feed the hungry. But there's some aspects, I think, that people would use this outside of, you know, looking at ground flow or flow of water through the ground, or however you want to say that. I'm not doing a very good job of capturing it. It's not going to be a giant predictive model per se on, you know, what's going to happen, you know, in Lake Coeur d'Alene. What's not going to, you know, tell you what's going to happen, you know, in stock watering. It's a tool that looks at flow of water through the ground that has specific inputs based on the science that we have today and our understanding of those hydraulically connected bodies of water. So, you know, other than inputting our best information on climate, our best information on growth and demand, might share with us some, you know, information about the aquifer. But I want to be careful in that we don't think the model is the end all cure all for everything. It's a hydraulic model. I don't know if that answered your question or if that just confused matters. And some of these things that are listed on the purpose statement, really are what the, the crux of what the model may do, It can evaluate climate change drought tolerance. It will not evaluate population growth, but it may inform us of population growth and how it impacts the aquifer.
By adjusting pumping rates based on population.
Correct. So,
Some unitized version of land use change coinciding with water demand for that land use change and population.
yeah, 100%. I think one of the key things, again, I touched on it earlier, is help to reduce some of that risk should there be water conflicts in the future, or at least have everybody, agreeing that, this is the model, this is the base that we're going to get our information from, and not just people coming in with their own versions of, science to confuse matters. Other planning tools, there's a good use of the model. Now, again, as I say, the model is big. I mean, the aquifer is a big thing. When we look specifically at your utility, will it show, all of your capture zones perfectly delineated out? Probably not. I mean, that's a very specific use. It's like saying, I have this distribution system model, here it is, and then walk away from you, and then you would have to figure out how to run that. I think that it makes, for some transparency, to say that if you have somebody with modeling expertise, they could probably take the ModFlow model and make it work. If you don't have that expertise in-house, then you're probably not going to be able to delineate each one of your special capture zones, or for a wellhead protection area, or what have you. So yes, it's there for other planning tools, but suffice it to say that it would not be something that's just packaged in a box you could pull out, use it without any type of formal training or expertise. The planning time range, that's something that I think we need to consider. What are we looking at for that planning horizon? Is it 20, 30 years? I think when you're looking at climate, 20 and 30 years may be on the short side of things, but again, those can always be updated in the model.
Yeah, I mean, from the population standpoint,
Same thing.
when we did this exercise in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, population forecast, we realized those way earlier than what the numbers we were using. So I think the population planning forecast 20 years, that's we can probably.
That's probably, yeah, exactly. Population, demand forecast, I would agree. Climate might, like I say, it might be a little bit longer than that.
I mean, we gotta look farther. We gotta look farther with that.
Yeah, and what I've seen John do in the past was do different scenarios based on what is the how quickly does climate change? There's RCP, I believe and it's listed at 4.5 and 8.5, 8 being the most severe change in climate that has a significant impact on recharge. So, there's a couple of different factors that we'll need to consider when we're looking at that. There might be more than one type of climate impact that we may want to look at. Any questions, comments? Oh, you already changed. You're fast. So we'll talk a little bit about, what we can use this for aquifer protection tools. There is particle tracking capabilities. Again, that's something that depending upon your specific wellhead capture zone, that may look different from purveyor to purveyor. It's not a one size fits all type of thing. So it does have the capabilities, and with the multi-layering would be a more granular view of what may be going on as opposed to a single layer. We've talked a little bit before about, updating the boundaries. I don't know if we want, how we go about that just yet, and I think that's where we really need to focus some time in finding our experts and getting them to the table so we can start having those conversations. I know people get pretty anxious when you want to be more restrictive on what land use looks like around an aquifer boundary. You may have a difference of opinion from those of us in the room and online. But again, if you have a wellhead that's near a boundary, then maybe perhaps that boundary should be a little more restrictive. So, there's a lot of that discussion that still needs to happen. Other protection benefits, I think, as we just talked about, particle tracking, the different layers of the aquifer. If there's a water quality event, it would be easier to look at, what those impacts are. I'm not sure. I know that there are some special wellhead protection areas that are being thought of on the Idaho side, similar to the Karazar in Washington. Do you have any more insight on that, YJ?
Yeah, so APD's been contracted with Alta, been doing quite some time trying to come up with a process. It's gonna be different than Spokane County's process with regards to the CARES. They're gonna call them sensitive aquifer recharge areas. And potentially be using LiDAR to identify some of those sensitive areas, focusing mostly on, those recharge areas pertaining to lakes like Hauser, for instance, and Rathdrum Creek coming out of Twin. And perhaps taking a more deliberate approach to identifying specific areas. And then, working from, once they establish a good process for, I think mostly we're kind of, get in the wash machine trying to figure out how sensitive we want to be with regards to, that protective area and what's that resolution. So that's some of the things we're currently working through right now, but we're hoping to use some existing LiDAR information to, see how good we can get and identify if that's acceptable. And then from there, kind of have some discussions with elected board, the county commissioners in terms of, what the acceptability of developing an ordinance might be. So anything else that I missed on that?
That really seems like a great opportunity to kind of dovetail that work in with this aquifer update.
Agreed.
And I know that both you and Suzanne are very active with APD. So if there's anything that IWAC may be able to do in that regard, I think that everybody would be on board with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I have mutual support. Alyssa sits on the board too, so.
Oh, sorry, didn't you?
Yeah, and so, yeah, I think we'll have, lots of opportunity to, collaborate between the organizations and.
And we don't want to repeat anything, work together, obviously.
Right, I think that's the key right there. Let's get the sausage making done at one time.
Yeah.
And potentially that would make it a little bit more palatable to electeds. Okay, there's buy-in from water community, around here with this idea and we do.
And I think that's an excellent point, Jeremy, because IWAC is probably not as well known as APD with the electeds. But having us come to the table with APD during those discussions to say that, look, you know, you have the support of all the water utilities right here. You know, maybe that will help them get on one side of the fence or the other, hopefully our side. Good. That's great. Cool.
So they like subsurface LiDAR? Is that what we're trying to use or just?
I'm not a
surface
big LiDAR
material?
expert. We got a crash course in it and I'm not sure that I still really understand it. So there, you probably know much more than anyone, but like there's a green LiDAR. And so it's not the, and so you can pay to have that really high resolution
Okay.
LiDAR flown.
Yeah.
But it's pretty expensive. So you wanna like take a creek, for instance, and you're gonna fly that creek for, you know, or just a recharge area and then pay to get that. But then, who was it that had the existing LiDAR? One of the state agencies had it. I almost want to say it was Department of Transportation. And so, also was able to find some existing recent LiDAR.
Yep.
That was completed, that wasn't really super high resolution stuff, but it was very wide, DNR.
Watching this, yeah.
Okay, and so it was very wide, pretty widespread, in the panhandle, in Kootenai County in particular, and so we were hoping to just maybe use that free resource, if you will, to see if it's, you know, provides resolution that might be acceptable. But it wasn't the really fine resolution stuff. Initially, we started talking about using that, but then we were like, and geez, it's gonna cost a lot of money, it's gonna eat up all APD's funds, and so it ended up being,
It'd be cool.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
What wasn't considered?
So it seemed like it just took the surface and it didn't go to depth and,
Yeah, you're mostly
water.
looking at plants and you have to talk about is it spring or fall and you gotta do it the right season.
Yeah. And yeah, I know they're
Coverage.
figuring out algorithms now that can actually extend some of the returns from LiDAR, so you can see a little bit down, you can even do underwater from
Yeah.
an aerial platform, which like blows my mind.
yeah. And this wasn't like drone LiDAR, this was airplane LiDAR. Cool, different piece there.
Interesting.
Cool stuff.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. It's always one of those things where, you know, if you don't understand it, and people talk about it, it's kind of like, well, kind of get it, but it's good to have a little bit of background, so thank you. So before we move on, there are probably some other protection benefits that an update to the model would give us as well. There are, my understanding from our meeting last month was that some of the wellhead capture zones and special wellhead protection areas may not be as well delineated or defined from our partners in Idaho. This would give them the capabilities to have that done as well. So when we look at drafting this purpose statement, and I think, you know, the title on the agenda was, you know, looking at funding and information for the update. Having that strong purpose statement or scope of work, I think, is a critical piece before we move forward to look or talk about funding with agencies. It's good to say we have this idea, but I think we really need to drill down to, you know, the most valuable aspects of this from an aquifer protection standpoint, water quality, purveyor use, protection boundaries, those types of things are all important factors in that purpose statement. But if there are other benefits that you can think of And no, gold piece isn't one of them. But if there is something out there that, again, doesn't pop to mind, if you think about it, please send me or IJ or Suzanne, really, whomever a note, and we'll share that information out with everybody. Next slide, please. So I spoke about this a little bit earlier in identifying some partners and helping us to build some consensus around what a model update is. Suzanne has listed a few folks here. Haley Miller. I have not heard from her, or
And
if you've got any response.
I will tell you that I missed this note from her
Oh, okay.
to get him. So I sent it out this morning at about 9:30
Oh,
a.m.
no worries.
saying, Neely, you're invited. I'm so sorry that
No, that's okay.
so,
Yeah, I think it's just important we get these people, moving to the table. That's the key to it all. Haven't heard back much from Dale, but it sounds to me like IDWR is interested and would like to see this move forward. I sure got that impression last month with Seth and his conversations that he shared with us.
so he's from DEQ.
Yes, but from the conversations, it sounded to me as though IDWR would be very interested in looking at this as well, because I mean, they're really the ones that put the focus on the IWAC group to begin with, right? So I would assume it's dangerous, I know, but that they would have some interest in seeing this move forward.
Who does Dale Ralston work for? And himself probably, but
I think,
Retired consultant, I think he used to work for
He used to be
IDWR.
UI professor.
yeah, I think he was for a period of time, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not, I
I mean, I'm
think he,
surprised he was retired when I went to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
He's
still
not
doing
spring,
this?
he's not spring chicken.
Dan's supposed to be
well,
retired
yeah, I'm
too.
supposed to be retired too. You just kind of get drawn in. Just happens.
And I don't know if you noticed, but when I sent out, I think the original meeting, I did link to Dale Ralston's study that he did. And they have all been relinked on our website because DEQ had redone their website. And so all of them were broken links. I just discovered and got those fixed. So we do have links to the previous studies that have been done and Dale Ralston's work around.
Yeah, he's done a lot, so.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
he's still around.
yeah, probably
He'd
we
be a
have.
great person to have at the table for sure.
Yes, 'cause
Yes.
he was U of I hydrogeology. He ran that program and he retired. Yeah.
Yeah, even people that have been involved in the past that are still around.
Yeah.
Even on the Washington side, Guy Gregory, right? And like,
Mhm.
I don't even know would it be Dan? Or who would be at ecology now that be the main point of contact? So I think getting their input would be super helpful too. I think Guy Gregory's involved in this when it was going on, so he's probably lessons learned would be helpful. And, next steps that were identified back when that was done.
I'll follow up with Rob because I thought Rob was going to talk to somebody at ecology,
Oh, okay,
but I'll follow up with him on that by Jake.
yeah. Isn't Dan Sturgis that I did email her?
He was IDWR, or still is
Still is,
IDWR.
okay, but it's Neely's a contact there.
He's newer,
Yeah.
newish,
Newish,
within 10 years. Is that considered new?
right? That's,
Yeah.
New
For me,
compared to
yes.
Dale Ralston, put it that way.
anybody online have any suggestions of other contacts? Or perhaps government agencies that should be involved? Okay.
So
Um,
sorry. I was
I
reading through some stuff. I was digging through some old things a while back. And I'm not sure if this was included in one of the older studies, but in 2007, it looks like the city was involved with the Idaho Department of Lands to work with them to install, I'm gonna butcher this word, because I apologize, I can't pronounce it, but piezometers in the lake to see how it affects the aquifer.
Isometer. Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't find any documentation further on if that moved forward, but I was just curious, is that something that we need to follow up with Idaho Department of Lands?
Great question.
Mhm.
And I could send this report and some of these email documentations because it was a permit that was submitted by Jim Markley in July of '07. And they were supposed to place a total of 5 meters on the lake bed to measure thermal gradients across the lake bottom and evaluate seepage rates from the lake to the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Todd had mentioned Stan Miller. I think that was a good suggestion.
yeah.
I didn't see that chat right there. I couldn't quite see it. There was another one.
Is there another one? Let me have a look at the chat. Hold on here, let's see. Jim says IWRR has a new, I'm gonna make this wider, I can't read it. Interim Assistant Meg Wolf. You might open a chat with her and see if some research could be funneled or facilitated via her office. And it's IWRR, IWRI with the I. Let's see, there was another one here. Stan Miller. I think that's all the chat that came in.
And I mean, I think that we route back in Coeur d'Alene Tribe
Mhm.
and
Laura, probably.
Laura is still working for them. She doesn't work for the Lakes program, but she does work in their climate change program, which I think would be a perfect way to get her back into this brain trust here.
Yeah, she attended IWAC meeting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
She's a PhD now.
She is.
She's a PhD now.
Oh, yeah.
do you know what climate studies they use? Like, because I think this is one of those things where it's important to be all inclusive and look at how we approach climate.
Mhm.
But is it something that's going to be, I'm not trying not to be too insensitive, but if you have a climate model that's used on 40% of the aquifer, do you want to change climate models for 30% and change climate models for 10%? I mean, I guess my question would be, I appreciate bringing Laura in with her expertise, especially with the tribe and the climate work that they've done. But do you think that they would be accepting of a climate model, say with the different scenarios of climate variability?
Yeah, I would
I
imagine
guess-
that they're looking at basin-wide, not just part of the aquifer. I don't think that there's any solid modeling that would be reasonable to trust to bring it down to that scale.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Just overgeneralization at that point.
Because I think to date, the work done by Oregon State University.
Yeah.
And Climate Toolbox that's developed through that has probably been the widest, the most widely distributed climate model. But so that may be something that we need to consider when we look at back to that purpose statement.
Yeah, I think they're using models like that to inform research questions.
And I'm not a climate model expert either, so I really don't know what the variances between them are, if they're really that significant or not.
It all depends on grid size and bringing it down to a grid size of interest.
Sure.
So if you take a big one, you can only get so small before you start bringing in a lot of uncertainty down at a local level.
Okay,
So,
all right. So yeah, we'll circle the wagons and try to get some of the folks that, we mentioned here today rolled into this, and if we can't, maybe it's better served to, not a specific person in some of these groups, just reaching out to that department and asking who is available to attend and give us some additional feedback or input.
I wonder about Allison Beal King, who was with us a lot and had a climate, a grant from the National Institutes of Health. I don't know exactly how that ended up and that she's still working on that, but for a while she was very much focused on understanding our issues with water, and so she might be another one we bring in some capacity to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, she is the chair of the School of the Environment at WSU now. I think she was like vice chair or something else, but she's in charge of that school, so it certainly has.
Do we have another one?
Yes, it's just what they recommend updates to a model file.
That's a good question.
What was that?
Ask USGS what they would recommend for updates to a mod flow model. So actually, if we can't get them to do the work, we could maybe see what they would think about what would make a legitimate update.
Great point. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, as we kind of continue to identify some partners, of course, including perhaps some special interest groups or non-governmental organizations to the discussion. Having the experts that we bring in to discuss what that purpose statement is and looks like. I think I already moved on to the next slide.
We have, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Having those experts and everybody helping us really drive down to the most basic points of that purpose statement is easier to share out then with a lot of those other stakeholders once the borders have kind of been put on it, so to speak. And then at least we can begin the education process, bringing people on board to understand what this really is and means, rather than just, opening the floodgates for all sorts of ideas that may not be pertinent or even realistic within the model. So at some point, we will get to this point, I believe, of bringing all those other people into the table, but at that point, at least to me, and if I'm off base here, please jump in. This is more of an educational opportunity and a way to help build consensus around the model. Not so much, to bring the model back to ideation and redraw the purpose statement. So what are folks' thoughts on that?
Well, I would agree. We have to be really clear about what our purpose is to know whether some of those people are going to have input that is valuable, certainly educating them about it. But if we're not clear what we want to do with it,
right?
I think that we can't even begin to collect the money to do it.
I would agree. So I think that's kind of really where we sit right now is really bringing together that strong purpose statement getting the experts in the room so that we can have that open, honest discussion with them on what this is, what this looks like, what it means to not just IWAC, but all of our partners. And then begin to take it forward.
Do you think we would benefit from having a subcommittee that actually works on this and brings something back to the group? Or is this something that we can just dig in here, you know, and put chart paper on the tables and have people just start writing ideas and make it a working session? Which is a little hard to do with online.
Yeah, I thought about that when Suzanne asked me to do this, you know, just to get on the whiteboard and say, okay, let's draft a purpose statement, or, you know, put a draft statement on the board and see what sticks. And then it was kind of like, well, how do we share that with everybody online? So, you know, my other thought was, if we can get people that if they have something that we didn't discuss today in that purpose statement, and I know that everybody has these slides available that kind of lays out the basis of that purpose statement. There's something missing from that, or you need more information about that. Let's get that happening sooner rather than later. So then maybe at our next meeting, we will have a draft purpose statement put together, and then we can kind of pull that apart. I think having Suzanne's input on that purpose statement is critically important too. So, you know, I don't want to overstep my bounds, and but at the same point in time, we do want to kind of keep the momentum going forward rather than to stall on this. So
so if we requested that everybody send in their ideas of what a purpose statement might look like, and then we could compile those with just everybody's name and who sent it.
Or even if, you know, a simple check the box, if you're good with what's listed here on this presentation, as far as purpose statement or areas of focus, you know, your silence may be enough. If there's something in here you feel passionate about, we just need to get that, we need to get that in and identified. And then really, in the meantime, what I'd like to do is, when Suzanne gets back, is maybe Suzanne, IJ, and Alyssa and I can start to drill this down a little bit. Does that sound workable, IJ? Alyssa? Okay, because like I said, I think it's really important just to kind of keep the ball rolling, and I don't want things to drop off the radar. So if anyone has anything, get it into us before the end of the week. And we'll start rolling this. Doug, what do you got to say?
I keep turning myself off. So one of the things, because we're looking at a similar thing with the SAJB, is in Washington, if you do new source development, you need to have your capture areas delineated. And I don't know, at the last meeting, it kind of sounded like the state did that for you in Idaho, but in Washington, that's a big benefit of having well, that was one of the reasons the SAJB originally formed, was so that they had that capability. And then the model died, and we're looking at a new one. But in terms of a benefit for purveyors in the state of Washington, having that capability to generate your required wellhead capture areas.
Yeah, it sounded like that's not required in Idaho, and someone asked the question of could the state change and use that? Like, I don't think that's realistic, but it might be a value add type planning tool for water providers to more better understand where that capture zone would be. And maybe leverage it in their municipalities, in terms of growth and that type of thing, but I don't think that we're changing the state, no way.
It certainly seemed like Seth was interested in seeing.
Yeah, well, Seth's a hydrogeologist and wants to see more things like that.
Sure, sure.
He's not a regulator.
Henry, you had your hand up. Did you have?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking about the purpose statement and the goals, you know, for this new model, and I was just wondering, okay, a couple of things. I think, hold on just a sec. So, I know our city council is concerned about water purveyors and the aquifer in this area, and I thought maybe some of the organizations that IWAC would reach out to would be city governments. I wonder ours might be open to being a part of it all. I don't know, but anyway. And then the other, okay, so then thinking about goals and purpose, you know, I was just wondering, just from my own experiences, okay, so we would come up with goals and purpose, but then possibly as future funders or governmental agencies or NGOs get brought in, that they might also have goals and purposes for the model that might shift emphasis a little bit from what we may come up with next week. Anyway, it was just a wondering that it might be a little bit of a fluid target for a little while, figuring out what this model should do and can do.
Yeah, that's a good point, Henry. I think that is why it's really important for us to develop that purpose statement. This is not necessarily although it could be used, I guess, in some respects, this is not an economic development planning tool, right? It's not a building tool. So there are people, I think, that would like to see the model do other things. But on the face value of this model, what it's designed for is to provide clean, safe, fresh drinking water, and understand, you know, our aquifer better and help protect our aquifer as well. So, you know, if it falls outside some of those core values, then yeah, I think that's why having that purpose statement or even scope of work pretty well finalized before we get to that point is important.
In our last meeting, Dan, you mentioned that there were unanswered questions or questions that the last study had left. At least that's how I remember the conversation. And I went into the old study looking for the questions, you know, looking for these unanswered questions. And I didn't find any particular place where I saw that. So I wondered.
Challenge my memory. Let's see.
And along those lines, I sit here thinking about what did the 2007 USGS study did. I'm a big fan of not recreating the wheel.
Right.
And so initially, did USGS publish any purpose statement goals with the original study? We could take those as the foundational blocks of starting an update. And then along what you just had mentioned, what were there any next steps identified after it was, you know, released or, you know, done? So I kind of look at, like, you know, maybe it'd be worth stepping back in time a little bit and seeing if USGS had any published purpose statements or goals aligned with when they were planning this original study.
It's a really good point.
Well, even to further that is, when there are people or have been people historically that have wanted to use that for, or bad actors wanted to use it for something that it wasn't intended for, judges or people making decisions, did they fall back on that purpose statement and it deterred people from misusing it? I mean, how much energy do we want to put into this if it's not really going to deter people that are going to use it for the wrong reasons?
Well, I guess in developing this purpose statement, it helps develop the scope of work so that when you move forward on what you want, it's a clear understanding of what you're asking, right? If you leave that a little more nebulous, then I think the lines get a little blurry. And honestly, it's been my experience, if you don't have a pretty good understanding of the scope of work, then your costs can go through the roof. So boy, you really hurt my brain, Tony Lee. I think maybe, you know, I'm just sitting here trying to think of what that might have been, but some of the understanding that we probably didn't have was some of the contours probably weren't as well defined. We didn't have as much information from various studies that have been done since that point in time. I think that there are a lot more points of withdrawal, increased well use demands. So there's probably a lot that, you know, really haven't been updated. So
here's from the groundwater flow model, their purpose and scope, and just
so yes, by Jay, we do have that. Tony Lee has that. Of course, she would have that.
but I don't have it in my head, I just have it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking like, you know, it's essentially just an update, right? And so
Right.
like, has the purpose changed or the goals really changed? I mean, maybe the goals change a little bit, but like the overall purpose largely is probably going to be very similar or the same.
But I do think that's something Seth Oliver was trying to get across to us, that the purpose wasn't useful enough for
Oh,
litigation or for stopping those bad actors. I mean, I don't want to speak for Seth, but that's kind of what I got out of his comment, is that maybe we needed to refine the purpose a little. But I think starting with it is definitely an interesting place to begin.
So I'll hit on 4 or 5 main points that they have here. Defining aerial and vertical extents of the model, defining boundary conditions, estimating components and rates of inflows and outflows from the aquifer, calibrating the model by adjusting model parameters such as hydraulic conductivity and specific yield. So the differences between simulated and measured quantities such as water levels and flows are minimized with respect to objective function. The primary purpose of the model is to serve as a tool for analyzing the SBRP aquifer inflows and outflows, simulating the effects of future changes in groundwater withdrawals from the aquifer, and evaluating aquifer management strategies. So a lot of that is contained in what we have discussed. There's some, I think, some elements that aren't there. They talk a little bit about demand, perhaps, but nothing in here really about climate other than inflows. So, you know, that may be a few areas that we want to.
so it's that plus X, Y, and Z that we had done.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we'll set down and kind of go over if we don't hear anything back from the group, and see if there isn't a paragraph that we can put together that is very similar in nature to this.
Or can you just use that as a draft?
Yeah,
Yeah, because in some regards, like, you know, using that as the foundation and we're just wanting to update that, then, you know, broadly accepted already, right?
Mhm.
So.
Those we-
Oh. I'll give it to Tony Lee so we don't lose it. You have that in PDF
Mhm.
as well.
Well, I just took pages off
Okay.
of right out of the original document. I was trying to begin to try and understand it, because this is not my area of
Yeah, well-
expertise at all.
This is probably to Bajay's point, just like a continuation, that's
Mhm.
probably best way to.
Really is, I mean, because that's what we're talking about, an update of that model. We're using the same platform with Monflow, everything is, you know, we're not going way off the beaten path to do this.
Yeah, the same intent and purpose for practical reasons is there.
Yeah, there are just some things that have changed in the last, 15 years or so that warrant more investigation, perhaps, such as climate and what we understand a little bit better about demand forecasting.
Yeah. My concern is we were to develop a purpose that's vastly different from that, and then,
Are we gonna
all
get-
that buy-in and resistance.
Yeah, you don't want to get into a match with USGS on, what it should look like. I agree. No, that's a very good point. So just moving along, the last slide here real quick, I think actually comes up under new business. We did talk about it a little bit last time, and that is doing a training class and, maybe looking at CEUs for it. I think that there's a lot of great speakers that we can include in this. In fact, Stan Miller would be a great one to have. Bob Haynes would be, for the history of this area, would be an excellent person to have. I talked to John Porcello. He's very interested in participating or speaking to this as well. So I think it's pretty well defined on what it is and what we're looking at, maybe a history, a little more understanding of the 2007 USGS model, and then what the purpose statement and updates look like and how that model be utilized by us folks today. Just kind of the rough outline or abstract, if you will, of what that may be. Or there is other topics that we may want to consider for this.
I'm wondering what's the order of events? Does this happen as we're developing the purpose statement? Because if this class, this training happens, maybe that would shift some of the new focus areas for the update. I don't know. I'm just wondering what's the order of operations here?
It just kind of dawned on me. I mean, to Jason and Bajay's point, not diverging too far off what USGS did with their purpose statement. To me, it makes sense that, this is just my point of view for what that's worth, presenting that purpose statement as part of this. So the purpose statement would be pretty well final based on what's existing with USGS from their 2007 purpose statement. A few tweaks that we add. And then this is more of an educational and training for those folks that don't understand what's going on and why we're doing it. This might be that tool that we use for, like Henry mentioned, for education for electeds. Or for other interested parties, but to me, it would be, we would finalize a purpose statement and then do the training. To put this class together to manage schedules and everything, I think we're probably a month and a half out. And then if you want to advertise it, that's another month and a half. So class is probably, we're looking spring at the earliest.
So who's the audience for this?
Well, that's the interesting thing too. Anytime that you're able to offer continuing education units, you're looking at operators, managers, maybe not so much elected officials. I think engineers can use CEUs for their professional growth. And then it's what that distribution list looks like, as far as, do we get this in front of electeds and other boards? So I think you could have a very wide ranging audience.
So does it need to be 3 hours, you think?
I think we're getting.
If you want CEUs for it, has to be 3 hours.
So one thought would be is that IWAC could partner with the Inland Empire subsection and do a whole session on this in a truck rodeo or something, and you're getting the same audience from both states typically.
True.
Go to that.
True. Predominantly more operators in focus.
And
Yeah.
managers,
Yeah.
probably
Probably
less
less electeds or
elected for
board
sure,
members,
but you can invite them to that session. I don't know, some ideas.
I'm going to the subsection meeting on Thursday. I'll see what they're.
I'm always trying to drum up.
Yeah, they're always looking for classes and
We
stuff.
could do
We'll see what
Whole
they're,
afternoon in it. For instance, we want to do it longer.
I think they're, yeah, I don't know if they're full or not, so I'll find out by Jake, see what's available. Sure.
And another thought, remembering how we did the irrigation landscape design standards, we did a day-long workshop. And then you and Terry
Yeah.
took it out on the road as a road show. Maybe this is another situation where we would, work internally to have a really cohesive,
Condensed.
content and then take it out on the road to those different leaders who need to hear about this and get their buy-in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good point.
that's a really good
Workshop on it to start with some presenters. And
Yeah. And then take that and pare it down to
Yeah.
half an hour, 45 minutes or whatever.
And we can get somebody there to talk about climate and why that's important to be part of this model.
Hi there. Just a couple of thoughts. One of the things I was just thinking about with this model is our groundwater, our water supply situation is pretty unique, in the United States. And, so Dan, one of the last times you talked about with a model is about management, right? One of the items for purposes for a model is management. And it seems like this model could become not just a training tool, but I apologize for this word, but could be a marketing of the benefits of having such an aquifer, and thus the need to preserve and maintain and take care of this aquifer. It seems like a group that might be a nice part to have in this training would be, again, electeds, real estate people who would be interested in taking care of the aquifer, maybe not just for scientific purposes, but for just the economic and personal benefits that this aquifer provides to this region. I don't know. I mean, I could see if it was taken on the road, again, I could see this being a council presentation. Anyway, just my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Henry. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions? If you have any other speakers in mind, please let me know. I'm happy to put together the CEU application for Idaho and Washington. Then I'll work with whoever wants to condense it to a roadshow discussion.
So thinking about next steps, would it be useful for me to pull out the purpose that's here and send it out with the purpose statements that Suzanne put into this PowerPoint and just ask for people to make comments or send us feedback, and maybe I could even do it through Survey Monkey, so it's really easy for them to click, like
Sure.
you said, what they agree with. I'm just looking at how do we actually expedite this and have it happen, given the holidays and everybody's busy schedules, what's gonna,
Yeah, I think if we can condense that into like a Survey Monkey and get it out to everybody and, ask for a response ASAP, like,
by next
By-
Monday.
by next
give it till
Monday,
next
yeah.
Monday.
that would be outstanding. Because you're right, it doesn't, give us a ton of time perhaps to sit down and parse out that purpose statement, although I agree, a lot of it's probably written for us. It might just be plugging in a few key phrases, and that may be all there is to it, so.
And would it be important to know people's order of priority? Like if we're only gonna add one thing or two things in, or do they just check off everything that they think fits?
What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, because then we run the risk of having 18 different points to add in.
I would say to limit it to the top two.
Yeah, but
But
at
even
a
at
certain
that, you
point,
can
though.
still get 16 different answers.
Yeah, and then we just, okay, can't include everything.
Would it be better that we just do it the other way around? And maybe we get together and write a draft purpose statement, send that out to the group for a thumbs up or thumbs down. What is missing? Maybe that's a better, cleaner way to go. Thoughts? No.
Yeah, I mean, I would, without looking at from what you just said, it's probably already there.
I think it's really close. I think there's probably, just like I say, a few statements missing.
And then I think we start from that foundation and then identify, based on these couple of meetings and discussions that we've had, known things that need updating.
Mhm.
Just a bulleted list essentially of known, those will become the goals for the update, right? That bulleted list of, and so ask for consensus on, essentially gonna be asking for consensus on that list. One, if you agree with the purpose statement as drafted, and two, is this list comprehensive or what's missing from it?
And I guess the question I would ask is, how important is consistency between the city of Spokane, SAJB, and IWAC?
Consistency with what?
With the scope of work or the purpose of the model update.
I will go back to do any of those entities not agree with the 2007 study purpose? Or take objections with it? Because I mean, that's kind of where I'm going back,
Yeah.
like, it was essentially accepted by parties, well, some of them didn't exist then, like IWAC, for instance, but we're accepting of the USGS model. I haven't heard that there's been any,
Doug has a comment.
I don't know.
So, from what SAJB currently is looking at in terms of updating their wellhead protection model, I think Seth touched on it when he spoke, is that the grid size of the original mod flow model precluded it from really being a wellhead protection model. And I think the intent was to make it was so that it wouldn't be. So so if you're just kind of building on the original BiState model purpose, it's a lot different than folks who are trying to have a wellhead protection model. So there would be that difference in what somebody would want to use it for.
Well, is that a more logical approach to, sit down with Suzanne, by Jalis and myself and just kind of put that together and send it out? Because then we can shape it a little bit more. You were talking about budget.
Yeah,
Everybody good with that approach? See a couple heads
Do
nodding.
we need to ask for consensus?
I think at some point it just gets pen to paper, right?
Yeah.
I think that's gets us out of the discussion, pen to paper, and then, you know, next steps from there.
Looks like we got a lot of thumbs ups.
Okay. Well, those will be the next steps, and then also we'll continue to try to engage with our regional experts, subject matter experts, and see if we can't get them in the room as well.
And I heard that you checking on to see if our first CEU training could be at the truck rodeo.
Yep, I got that.
Do we know when Suzanne comes back from celebrating her mom's 80th birthday?
I thought it was next week, but I'm not sure.
So I guess that just depends on how you guys are gonna set up your meeting.
Yeah. Maybe the three of us can write something up and then get it in front of Suzanne for comment and input.
And you've got her notes,
Yeah,
so she's already written quite a bit.
yeah,
I just pulled out the one, purpose and scope from the old one. I'll send that out, and work from that too.
perfect. Okay. I'll shut up now, bye Jay.
All right, thank you. We had quite a bit of discussion. I presume there's no more on the 2007 USGS study? Are we, everybody comfortable moving on? Okay, next item under old business was planning aquifer protection and conservation outreach campaign for 2024. Tony, Lee, did you have anything on that topic?
I didn't, Suzanne added that one, because, you know, we were looking at those 4 videos that were created out of the ads that were used last time, and setting up, but I think that's part of a budget discussion that we need to look at, maybe in January to decide how much money do we want to put to an outreach campaign. Because so far we have not identified a budget item for that.
Okay.
But we have all the creative that we need from last year that we can use.
Okay. And maybe that's just something we table for discussion in January with regards to the budget and
Okay.
whether we want to use those 4 videos or create new content. And then Suzanne's ideas, she had added that one. I didn't have opportunity to discuss with her on that, but anybody else have any ideas or thoughts? All right, that sound good then?
Sounds good.
Okay. We already talked about one of the items under new business, the CEU training. I don't know if there was more to add on that, but the second was planning first field trip to visit purveyor infrastructure. I might just throw it out there that our admin building remodel should be mostly, at least the meeting room will be complete by the time IWAC meets next time. And so I'm happy to offer up our facility for a meeting space in addition to, touring our new office and or like we have wells that are pretty close to our office building that we can take a look at if we want to look at infrastructure. So unless somebody else has any other ideas, but
Yeah, we love to offer tours up here at Upriver. And definitely have that available on the list if, I mean, and we need to tour the turd factory too there, IJ.
yeah, and we can definitely tour our reclaimed water facility.
I call it the poop factory.
Yeah,
Do you have meeting space now at Upriver, Doug?
Not really, no. Probably a year and a half out. Barring city council intervention. The tours are good, but in terms of a meeting space, no, not really.
Wells are pretty small though.
Yeah, well, one's boring, just water.
He's got that one room that's open to, shows the aquifer and the old drill with all meet in a circle around there.
Maybe not in the
For
winter.
acoustics.
Bring a heavy coat.
We're gonna be fine in the summer.
so I didn't know if we had a schedule that anybody had thought about in terms of where we wanted to start, begin, and.
No, we,
No, I think it was just a spitball idea in the past couple meetings of just getting out and.
I think we were only talking about a couple a year, just to.
Kind of move things
Well,
around.
I for one would love to, be back in Liberty Lakes territory. You guys have been under construction for a long time.
It should be done, knock on wood, they're supposed to be done, so. So anyway, happy to offer up our facility. I can talk to Suzanne, see what her preference would be too,
Mhm.
when she returns, but.
And I know at one point Whitworth Water District, which is way the heck out there, they wanted to show off their facility to everybody. So I'm sure we can get others who want to, invite us out, but I think it's just choosing someplace and starting.
Yeah.
And we would have been, for next meeting, we would have been at Consolidated, so you're awfully close. Since we're going back and forth between Idaho and Washington for our
Pretty close.
meetings.
They even have a reservoir in our service area, so.
Really close.
I don't know,
We're not
Okay.
sore
do
about
we need to get consensus on where we're heading and what we're gonna do, or do you wanna wait and talk to Suzanne about it?
I'll just talk to Suzanne unless. Unless everybody wants to make consensus on where we're heading and.
Let's bring her into the loop.
Awesome. Okay. Any other new business that we need to identify or discuss? Or about any relevant updates around the table that anybody wants to share about? Won't call you on the spot, but if anybody's got something they'd like to share, we're certainly a good opportunity to do so. Pretty quiet out there. I guess everybody. Yeah. So if there's nothing for the good of the order, we can adjourn the meeting and everybody have a safe and happy holiday season.
See you next year.
Merry Christmas, y'all.
Yeah, see you all next year.
Thanks, everyone.
Next
Sure.
week shows up.